Southern Kenya, mid-afternoon. The sun pressed low against the dust as two rangers stood on a ridge above the gully. Below them, in the hush between wind gusts, the lion didn't move. For nearly 3 hours they had watched, unsure. No circling birds, no scavengers nearby, just a thick-maned figure half-curled near the dried reeds, one side pressed to the soil. The eyes were closed, the ribs lifted faintly. A call went out to the field post. Sama, a biologist stationed nearby, arrived an hour later on foot, walking the last stretch without a sound. She dropped to a crouch near the gully's edge, scanning the lion's flanks. No blood, no limp, no clear wound. Still, the lion remained motionless except for breath, a shallow rhythm, barely catching. He wasn't dead, but something in his stillness felt heavier than pain. Salma moved slowly down the embankment. The dust here clung to everything, coating her boots, catching in her lashes. 15 meters out, she stopped. The lion's head was angled slightly away. His ear twitched once. Still no rise, no growl, not even a glance. She watched the way his tail lay flat, unmoving. The line of his spine pressed deep into the soil, as though he'd sunk there for a reason. She whispered, once, "I see you." But it wasn't meant for him. The gully curved gently around a bank of thornbrush and stunted fig trees. In the silence, the only sound was the shift of her pack as she lowered herself to sit. She didn't reach out. Didn't move closer, just sat, the dry wind combing over her shoulders. The sun passed another hour. The rangers rotated shifts above. Salma stayed. No new movement from the lion. A fly landed near his eye. He blinked slowly, but nothing more. By early evening, the light turned amber. Shadows stretched long behind the gully walls. The heat lifted. Salma took out a flask of water and sipped. Then, carefully, she drizzled a small line into the dust near her boots, a gesture more than an offer. Still, he didn't react. She studied the soil around him. The marks were faint, but there, old paw prints leading in, none leading out. One set larger, another set smaller. Cub-sized. She tilted her head, heart slowing. The second set disappeared into the underbrush. Shallow, spaced close. If the lion had let a cub here, something would have changed. Something was missing. Down in the gully, the air shifted slightly. The lion's chest rose once, a little deeper than before. His front paw twitched, but he made no move to stand. Sama leaned forward just slightly, breath steady. Her voice barely broke the air. "If you move wrong, you'll tear something." The lion blinked again. Not at her. Just once, then stillness again. Above them, the last rays of sun pulled shadows across the ledge. The air cooled. Another hour passed. The rangers began to call in updates. The vet team will arrive tomorrow, but for now there was nothing more to do. Still, Salma remained. Not to touch, not to coax, just to stay beside something that didn't have words left. If the lion had been injured, he should have hidden. If he'd been dying, the scavengers would have known. But this was different. This was a weight, long and silent, held in the body like a story not yet told. And she was willing to sit through the silence. The last of the sun dropped behind the acacia ridgeline, casting a long shadow over the gully floor. Salma hadn't moved in hours. Except to stretch her legs quietly and recrouch, the lion still lay curled against the dust, his breathing more visible now under fading light. Each rise of his ribs was slow, uneven. A deep effort pressed through something painful. She narrowed her eyes. The fur along his side was matted darker in places, and now, with less glare, she saw it clearly. A small tear in the skin. Not fresh, not gaping, but infected. Flies gathered where the fur split. They landed in pairs, circled, and returned. The lion did nothing to drive them off. Not a twitch, not a growl. Just breathe. Shallow, strained, but steady. The wound alone wouldn't have taken him down. It was the stillness that didn't fit. The way he didn't seem to be guarding himself or anything, as if all instinct had gone quiet. Salma reached into her bag and clicked the radio twice before raising it. Her voice stayed low. Injured male, breathing compromised, possible infection. No movement in 5 hours. A crackled voice responded. They'd come at first light. The vet team would need time, sedatives, transport gear. Tranquilizers were out of the question until they knew the full condition. She confirmed the coordinates. They told her to leave the gully before dark. She didn't. The rangers above rotated once more, their boots scraping against rock, keeping a careful line of sight. Salma stayed seated near the lion, not close enough to touch, not far enough to forget he was there. The night came quickly. With it, a quiet cold. She wrapped her arms around her knees, eyes fixed on the lion's flank. One breath. Pause. Another. Longer pause. At one point, he let out a rough exhale, not a sound of pain, just exhaustion. She watched the flies settle again. Then her hand moved gently to the soil. She began shifting loose dust toward the torn patch of fur, building a small ridge to shield it from the insects. The breeze helped a little. The lion's ears stayed flat. He still didn't lift his head. "If you get up now, it'll rip open," she said, almost to the air. Her tone was even, soft. "But if you stay like this, you won't make the morning." No movement, just breath, shallower than before. She looked again toward the paw prints that trailed from the thicket. Still no sign of return, no sound of movement. Whatever had happened, it had left him behind. Down below, in the hush between wind shifts, Salma adjusted her pack under her thighs. The cold was settling through the stone. She kept her eyes on his side, counting the pause between breaths. If they waited until dawn, he might hold on. But if infection spread through the night and fever followed, his heart might not last. The stakes were simple. If he stayed still, he might survive. If he stood too soon, it could tear muscle or deepen the wound. But if his breathing faded further, even stillness wouldn't save him. Salma didn't speak again. She didn't move, just crouched a few feet away, not interfering, not touching, only present. A line in the silence, holding space. And the lion, though battered and unmoving, didn't growl, didn't retreat. He just breathed. Shallow, uncertain, but still alive. The first raindrops came lightly, just after midnight. Cold, spaced, carried on a shifting wind that swept low across the gully. Salma didn't move at first. The sound was soft enough to be mistaken for insects. But when the wind shifted again and the sky growled low and steady, she reached into her bag and unfolded the tarp with slow, practiced hands. The lion didn't lift his head. The same shallow rise of breath marked each passing moment, steady only in its fragility. His flank now looked slick beneath the faint moonlight, the earlier blood now thinned by dust and the promise of rain. Salma draped the tarp over her shoulders and knees, crouching again near the same spot she hadn't left in hours. Water began to tap against the nylon in a scattered rhythm. Overhead, clouds thickened into one dark shape, and thunder echoed low against the hills in the distance. The lion's eyes remained shut. No twitch, no tremor, no retreat. The ground beneath them began to soften. The sharp dryness of the dust shifted into damp clumps. Salma adjusted her weight, careful not to slip closer. The earth at the edge of the gully had a history of collapsing under weight, but she knew her placement well now. She didn't need to look down. Her focus remained on the lion's ribs, rising slower than before. Thunder cracked louder now, not violent, just wide. A long, drawn-out hum that spread across the plain like a warning too old to change anything. She thought of the vet team, still hours away. Even if the rain held off, they'd struggle with transport down into this gully, and the sedative window would be narrow. The tarp rustled as wind pulled at one edge. She pressed it tighter, never glancing away. The lion moved once. Not far, a twitch along his foreleg, barely a stretch. But it was the first movement in hours that wasn't tied to breath. A long, low grunt followed. Not of protest, but something older. Fatigue, the kind that reaches through the bone. Salma whispered gently, "Easy." Just the word and nothing more. The lion did not respond. His eyes stayed shut, but he didn't flinch at the sound. Raindrops grew heavier. The gully began to hum with the soft impact of water on stone. The flies had vanished. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and something older, the scent of fur and silence and time. Salma shifted again to balance, keeping herself dry under the tarp. Her knees ached. Her fingers were cold. But she didn't leave. If the lion was waiting for something, it hadn't come yet. And if he wasn't waiting, then he was simply fading, breath by breath, in the place he chose. A longer pause between exhales now. Salma noticed it. I counted it. Thunder came again. Softer this time, fading in the distance. The storm was rolling over them, but not harsh, just long, just steady. She glanced toward the brush line where cub prints had vanished hours ago. No return, no noise, just wet leaves and the tap of water down the bark. Still, she didn't move. She stayed where she had been since afternoon, not in defiance of orders, not for hope, but because leaving wasn't a choice anymore. It simply didn't make sense. The lion let out one more breath, this one deeper. Not strong, not a sign of recovery, but it stirred the dust near his nose. Then stillness again. Around them, the storm fell quieter. Rain softened. The wind dropped. And in the hush of that new quiet, a different silence settled. Not empty, not loud, just shared. She stayed beside him, the tarp pulled close, her eyes fixed forward. No need to speak, no need to touch, just presence, just rain, and a lion who didn't flinch. By first light, the rain had thinned to mist. The gully held the scent of wet stone and trampled grass, and Salma's boots were soaked through from the hours spent crouched in place. She stood now, stiffly, as the vet team arrived on foot, 3 of them moving with quiet urgency down the slope. No trucks, no loud greetings, just clipped nods and murmured phrases as they approached the lion still lying motionless beneath the ledge. His breathing was lighter now. Not faster, just thinner. The vet, a lean man named Haroun, approached from the left, slowly, stopping several meters short to observe. He knelt without speaking and watched the movement of the lion's side. Salma passed him the notes she'd scribbled in the dark. Approximate hours of stillness, reaction to sound, condition of the visible wound. Haroun read them, nodded once, then set the papers beside him in the mud. Another ranger, Amina, began walking a wide arc around the gully's edge, scanning the earth. Rain had erased much, but not everything. Beneath a thornbush cluster at the east wall of the gully, she crouched and signaled quietly. Salma joined her. What she saw then was so faint it could have been missed, but it wasn't. Small paw prints, about the size of a human palm, pressed into the softened clay. They were close together, meandering, but purposeful. Cub prints. They weren't days old. They were fresh enough to hold shape, made just before the rain thickened. The path curved around the gully wall, then disappeared into the dense undergrowth beyond. Salma followed the track with her eyes, heart tightening. She hadn't imagined them the day before. There had been a cub, and it had walked out. Back near the lion, Haroun was preparing an injection, a mild anti-inflammatory, no sedative yet. Too dangerous with his state so low. He moved with care, every action slow, respectful. He didn't speak to the lion. None of them did. Salma walked back over and crouched once more beside the gully edge. She told them what she and the rangers had observed, how the lion hadn't moved in nearly 12 hours except for the shallow shifts in breath, how he hadn't growled, hadn't shown fear, hadn't guarded anything, not even himself. Haroun leaned in and examined the wound more closely now. A puncture, possibly a branch or horn. No sign of deep muscle tear, but infection had already begun to spread beneath the skin. He cleaned it gently, then pressed a dressing to stop further exposure. The lion flinched once, that was all. Amina returned and placed a small flagged marker near the paw prints. "He brought the cub here," she said softly, "or followed it." Salma nodded, eyes still on the lion's back. "And then let it go." The air was still again, thick with damp. Above them the cloud cover had begun to break, but not enough to bring warmth. Everything felt paused, as if the landscape itself was holding its breath. Haroun packed away the supplies. They'd wait a few hours before attempting any lift. Moving the lion now would risk shock. If his condition held steady, the plan was to carry him up the gully, slow and low, then transport him to the field post for observation. But there was still risk. If he rose too fast, he'd rupture. If he lay too long, the fever might take him. Salma looked once more toward the brush where the tracks disappeared. She said nothing. But inside, the silence was a shift. A fact, too quiet to ignore. This lion hadn't collapsed from a fight. He hadn't retreated out of pain. He had brought someone here, left them safely beyond the gully, and returned alone. And then he'd waited. Not for rescue, but perhaps to be sure they wouldn't come back. The morning wore on with slow progress. The sun climbed behind thin clouds, casting a soft, colorless light over the gully. Haroun administered a second dose of medication. Antibiotics this time, careful not to overdo the volume. The lion's body remained still beneath his touch, the occasional flick of a tail the only sign that something inside was still awake. Salma stood nearby, watching for any shift in rhythm. The team worked quietly. Each motion was measured. No loud voices, no sudden steps. The lion had not moved since dawn, not even to reposition his weight. The only change came just after midday, when the breeze turned toward the hill and the leaves on the nearby fig trees shivered. It was then, after hours of near silence, that the lion stirred. Slowly, not with urgency, but with something else. His head lifted, unsteady but deliberate. The muscles in his neck trembled with the effort. Haroun stepped back, giving space. The lion did not look at them. He didn't scan the gully or sniff the air. He looked east. Not just toward the rising slope, but past it, beyond the gully's rim, to where the grassland curved gently upward into low hills marked by scattered brush and shaded trails. His gaze stayed fixed, steady, as if seeing something only he could know. Salma noticed first. She shifted in place, following the line of his eyes. There was nothing unusual there, no movement, no sound, just the slope and a haze of tall grass brushing in the wind. But the lion didn't blink. He stared with such quiet purpose that something in her tightened. When he finally let his head drop again, slowly folding back into the dust, Salma turned to Haroun. "I want to check the ridge," she said. He hesitated. "You'll lose line of sight." "I don't need it," she replied, eyes still on the hill. "I just need to see where he was looking." She slung a small pack over her shoulder and stepped carefully around the lion's form. Haroun didn't stop her. Amina passed her a canteen as she moved uphill, silent. The climb was gentle but long. The terrain soft from the night's rain. Salma kept her eyes forward, scanning the grassline as she moved. It wasn't about what she hoped to find. It was about what she might understand. If the lion had left something behind or watched something leave, the answers wouldn't be here in the gully. The slope curved and dipped again as she reached the top, revealing a narrow trail winding into a shallow basin lined with scattered trees. There were no clear prints. The earth is too soft now for hard signs, But the quiet here was different. Still, but not empty. Salma paused and scanned the basin again. The lion's look hadn't been one of hunger or memory. It had been focused, and now she understood why. The place below felt tucked away, protected, a place where something small could wait without being seen. She crouched beside a patch of turned earth and ran her hand gently across the topsoil. A faint drag mark, nothing more. But enough. Something had moved through here recently. She stood slowly. The wind shifted again, brushing the tall grass behind her. She didn't call out, didn't push forward. She just watched. Then she turned back toward the gully, eyes still lingering on the basin below. Whatever had passed this way had gone carefully, and had been watched from a distance by the lion who still waited below. If it was a cub, it would be alone now. And if it stayed hidden, it had a chance. But if it wandered, or called out, there would be no protection left. Salma took one last look, then began the walk back down. Each step is quiet. Each breath is heavier. She didn't know yet what she was chasing. But the lion had looked for a reason, and now so would she. The trail east curved through hushed terrain, where the ground was soft from last night's rain, and the trees stood in thin rows like silent sentinels. Salma moved carefully, keeping her steps slow and low. Her eyes tuned not to what was in front of her but what moved quietly beneath it. She had passed beyond the ridge now, a little more than 2 kilometers from the gully, where the lion still lay under watch. There were no more tracks to follow, but the direction was clear. She trusted the moment when he lifted his head. She had seen the way he looked, not back toward the humans. Forward, toward something he'd left behind. The grass rose taller now, brushing her waist, rustling with each gust. The insects were louder here, and so was the wind. She paused often, scanning every line of earth, every turn in the underbrush. If there was anything left, it would be hiding. Tired, small, too quiet to find unless it wanted to be. She stopped near a broken cluster of thornbrush where the wind shifted again. A scent drifted faintly. Not decay, but something sharper, like sweat and old earth. Her heart slowed. She crouched low, placing one hand on the ground. The grass ahead moved, but not from wind. Then she heard it, faint, barely more than breath, a thin, dry sound that didn't carry far. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a growl, just a whimper. She froze, listening. The sound came again, high-pitched, fragile, stretched into silence before it ended. Not repeated like a call, not strong enough to travel. It was the kind of sound that slipped through noise unnoticed unless someone was listening only for that. She stepped forward. The branches ahead were low, tangled, part of an old fallen acacia twisted into a kind of shelter. Beneath it, the earth had been disturbed. Soft soil pushed aside by claws too small for a grown lion, but too wide for any other. She crouched again and slowly lifted one of the outer branches. There, half buried in the shadows of wood and dirt, lay a cub. It was small, no more than 6 months old. Thin. Ribs pressing against its sides, fur dulled from exposure. Its eyes were half closed, blinking slowly as if each movement was measured to save what little strength remained. One front leg was tucked beneath it at an odd angle, but not broken, just cramping from holding still too long. It didn't move when she appeared. Just looked at her, then blinked again. The flies circled and landed along its back, untouched. Salma didn't speak right away. She lowered herself onto one knee just beyond the edge of the branches, resting her forearms on her thighs, keeping her gaze low. She didn't reach for it, didn't try to move closer. The cub gave a short, dry breath. Not a cry this time, but something closer to resignation. She reached slowly into her bag and brought out a soft water pouch. She unscrewed the cap, cupped a bit in her palm and leaned forward, placing it gently onto the dirt, not close enough to startle, just near. The cub didn't shift, but it looked at the water and then at her. Selma whispered, not to coax, but to soothe, "You're all right." "I see you." No response, but no retreat. She scanned the small body again. No visible injuries, but hunger had hollowed it out. Its paws twitched occasionally, tiny pulses of effort with nowhere to go. She stood and marked the brush behind her with a torn strip of orange cloth, tying it around a tall reed. Then she lifted her radio and pressed the side. "I've found a cub, alive, weak, under shelter, still breathing." Haroon's voice cracked through. "Coming now. 10 minutes." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Salma knelt again as the wind picked up. The cub blinked once more, slower this time. No fear, no sound, just waiting, as if it had forgotten what it was waiting for. She didn't touch it, didn't try to carry it. That time will come soon. For now, she just stayed close, quiet. The cry that had led her here faded, but the reason remained. In the shelter of fallen limbs and earth, something still lived, and for the first time in days, it had been found. The late afternoon light had turned pale by the time the cub was brought back. The rescue team moved carefully, carrying the small body wrapped in a faded brown cloth lined with gauze and straw. It didn't cry. It didn't move much, but it breathed, slow and rhythmic now, thanks to a measured dose of glucose and heat from the ranger's jacket pressed gently against its side. Salma walked just behind the ranger, holding it. Her boots left shallow prints across the gully's slope, near where the morning's tension had first settled. She had not spoken since the radio call. She had only watched. The cub's eyes flickered open every so often, never wide, just enough to see that someone still walked beside it. Down below, the lion still lay beneath the outcrop where he'd been all along. Haroon had given him fluids through a line attached near the shoulder, not too deep, not too frequent. He had taken them in silence, never flinching. But his breathing was harder now. Each inhale sounded like it reached deeper than it should, each exhale slower than before. His eyes had not opened in over an hour. Salma signaled softly for the others to stop. She stepped forward alone, carrying the cub now against her chest. The cloth was damp from its breath, and the weight of it was almost nothing at all. She paused just at the edge of the lion's reach and knelt, lowering the bundle slowly to the earth. The lion stirred, not with sound, not with force. His head did not lift, but one paw, the front left, shifted. The claws stayed hidden, the pads dry and worn. It lifted a few inches from the ground, trembling slightly in the air. Then it stretched forward, gently, toward the shape just a few feet away. The paw fell back to the soil with a soft thud. His tail moved once, a single, slow sweep through the dust. Not enough to mean much, but enough to be seen. The cub did not react at first. Its eyes had closed again during the carry. But after a moment, its nose twitched. The scent was there now, familiar, ancient, undeniable. It shifted inside the cloth and gave a faint sound, no louder than a sigh. Then it began to crawl, slowly, dragging its body forward with small, unsure movements, each limb shaking under its own weight. No one touched it, no one urged it on. The cub moved in a soft arc, heading not toward warmth, not toward shelter, but toward the lion's flank. Inch by inch, it reached the space near his ribs and pressed its head down against the fur. The lion didn't open his eyes, but his breathing changed, no longer shallow and erratic, but slow, deliberate, gathered. Salma remained still, her knees damp from the ground. A ranger beside her whispered. He waited. No one answered. They didn't need to. The cub let out one last breath, curled tighter, and closed its eyes again. Beside it, the lion's paw lifted once more, barely, then settled gently onto the earth, close enough to touch. No roar, no sound, no display of triumph or pain. Just contact me. Just presence. In the fading light, the two bodies rested together, not reunited with noise or motion, but with silence held like memory between them. Sama exhaled softly, as if even breath might disturb the stillness. They would not be moved again tonight. If either stirred, it would be in their own time, and if they didn't, it would still mean something was whole now, even if only for a moment. Evening settled slowly over the gully, soft and weightless. The sun dipped behind the ridgeline, casting long blue shadows over the thornbrush and fading trails. The wind had dropped. The flies were gone. What remained was stillness, the kind that did not ask for sound or reason. Just quiet. Just presence. Salma sat with her knees tucked close, her jacket pulled around her shoulders. A ranger had offered her a blanket, but she declined. The earth was warm enough, and the moment didn't call for comfort. Only witness. A few feet from her the lion lay as he had for days, body unmoving except for the slow lift and fall of his rib cage. He hadn't opened his eyes since the cub returned, but he hadn't needed to. His paw now rested loosely near the small form curled beside him, the cub's flank pressed into the hollow beneath his shoulder. Neither stirred, but both breathed. Their rhythm almost matched now. Long exhales followed by silence, then breath again. The vet team remained quiet on the ridge. Haroun had checked the fluids once, whispered a few notes, then stepped back without a word. They'd agreed not to move either animal tonight. No stretchers, no crates, just time. Salma shifted slightly to ease the weight from one hip, careful not to make noise. Her eyes stayed on the pair. She wasn't watching for signs anymore, not tracking vitals, not waiting for change. She was just there. And they were, too. The cub hadn't moved since crawling against its father's side. Once its ear had flicked. Once its tail had twitched. But mostly it just lay still. Not from weakness anymore, but something gentler. Trust, maybe. Exhaustion. A kind of surrender that said, I'm not running anymore. The lion's breath, though slower than before, had deepened. The tremor that had haunted each exhale was gone now. The fever wasn't broken, but it had loosened its grip. Whether he would stand again, no one could say. But he had stayed, and the cub had returned. That was enough for now. Salma reached into her pack, took out the last of her water, and drank quietly. The taste of dust lingered on her lips. She didn't mind. It grounded her. A small bird passed overhead, too low to cast a shadow. A breeze moved through the grass but didn't reach the gully floor. In that hollow, time folded inward, not stopping, but slowing, holding. There were no flashlights, no photographs, no chatter, just this, a biologist sitting beside a dying lion and a cub who had somehow survived enough to come home. No one could name what passed between the three of them. It wasn't language, it wasn't a gesture. It was something else. The kind of thing that settles into the bones and stays long after the moment fades. Not memory, deeper than that. Night crept in, but no one moved to break the scene. Salma pulled her scarf higher, leaned forward slightly and exhaled through her nose. Her breath caught the last of the light and disappeared. Beside her, the cub shifted just enough to press its head tighter into the lion's side. And somewhere beyond words, beyond reason, something unspoken passed through them all. Not a promise, not a goodbye, just a quiet knowing. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. The kind that holds.